Hey everybody, Jonathan Van Horn here from Tooth and Coin. Today we're going to be diving into something that keeps many dentists up at night, managing your team effectively. We're going to cover some leadership essentials, smart bonus structures, and break down each key position in your practice. And since you're probably multitasking while listening to this, maybe you're reviewing charts or even catching up on emails, let's make your team management a little easier today. Though I have to say, sometimes getting your team all moving in the same direction feels about as challenging as a root canal without anesthesia. So let's dive in and make it a bit easier, shall we? When I started managing our team of almost 30 people here at Tooth and Coin, I quickly realized that my college strategic management courses really hadn't prepared me for real leadership. Those textbooks, they're full of organizational charts and management theories, and all these really crazy things. And they were kind of like reading about clinical procedures without ever even picking up an actual handpiece. Real leadership, I've learned, is a lot messier and it's a lot more nuanced, but it follows a fairly clear pattern when done correctly. If you think about someone like Steve Jobs at Apple, he was crystal clear about his vision. He wanted to make the best products on earth and to leave the world better than we found it. And so every product decision flowed from that vision. And similarly, while your dental practice might seem small in comparison to Apple, you're pursuing something equally meaningful, transforming a patient's health and confidence. The scale's different, but the principles are identical. Look, I know what you're thinking. You just want someone to tell you exactly how to run your practice. And here's the reality I've learned. There's no universal playbook. Every practice, every business is going to be different. You're going to have different team dynamics. You're going to have different patient bases. You're going to have different local markets, and you're going to have to accept that first. And the second thing that I'll admit is I used to roll my eyes at a lot of the stuff you're about to hear about because I used to think it was kind of fluffy and like weird things, but these business elements are absolutely critical now that I have run a team of the size that I run. And I was wrong about them being, basically hogwash. I was dead wrong. So let me show you why. Here are the things that you're going to need to have in order to be able to be successful at leadership in a small business. You have to have vision, you have to have a mission, you have to have core values, you have to have expectations set, and you have to have accountability. Those are the 5 components that I see that are important in leadership of a team of people. Even if it's 3 people, if it's 30 people, I slept on the importance of those things for a long time, and I've come to realize just how critical they are. And I hope that I'm going to be able to explain those things to you. So I'm going to give some examples of each of these things so that you can kind of run through them. So in terms of your vision, it's supposed to kind of be your North Star. So there's examples of that. It could be, to be the trusted dental home for every family in your area. It could be to revolutionize dental care in rural communities through technology and compassion. It could be to create lifetime smiles for 3 generations of your area's families or something like that. An example of a leader using a vision. So Howard Schultz at Starbucks, he started with just one coffee shop. His vision was creating what's called a third place between home and work. And that got into everything from store design to employee benefits. And your dental practice vision should have that same kind of clarity and purpose. Just apply it to dental care. In terms of missions, examples of missions could be that we provide comfortable, judgment-free dental care that fits our patients' lifestyles and budgets. It could be that we help anxious patients overcome their fears through gentle, personalized treatment. It could be that we build lasting relationships through exceptional dental care and education. In terms of your mission, this is an area that I always got kind of confused on is what's the difference between a vision and a mission? The vision is the destination. The mission's how you're going to get there. If you want to, become, the quality place, how are you going to get there? Well, you're going to get there by building lasting relationships through exceptional dental care and education. That's how you differentiate between the vision and the mission, and they are both important. So the next area, core values. These are really, really critical when it comes to holding people accountable. So examples of core values, integrity. We always recommend what's best for the patient. Excellence. We invest in continued education and the latest technology. Empathy. We treat every patient like family. Accessibility. We make quality dental care available to everyone. Teamwork. We support each other to deliver the best patient care. You can have your core values be pretty much anything. And my best advice to you on your core values is whatever you truly feel like makes you the person that run this business, to run this practice and to make this thing successful, have those core values mimic what you believe in yourself as your strengths and how you think you can get to the next level. And I haven't heard really very many people talk about this in terms of core values, but if you put superfluous kind of made up core values as being your thing, then you're going to build your business on a lie in a way, because you're not going to reflect your own core values. And if you don't do that, then you can't expect your team members to do the same. So in terms of looking at how to design your core values, make sure that you're utilizing things that you actually feel about yourself, that you want to be mirrored from your team moving forward. Because if you put everything on paper like the team members are supposed to do, then they could technically do the things that they're saying that they're supposed to do in terms of like, it's on paper, so I did it that way. But in reality, could very well be that they didn't do it with the reflection of your core values. Like in terms of accessibility, maybe the front office person didn't do a good job of actually booking that treatment or have the chairs be open enough whenever it's supposed to be. I don't know. But those are just some examples of how you use core values to reflect back on that accountability side of things. So an example of a team using core values is Satya Nadella, who was a part of Microsoft. She helped transform their culture with values such as learn-it-alls do better than know-it-alls. So in your practice, values may be pretty different. Example, like we treat every patient like family, but they all serve the same purpose, guiding daily decisions and behaviors. And note, to be the best dental practice in town doesn't count as a vision. That's like saying your treatment plan is to fix teeth. It sounds nice, but it kind of means nothing. To kind of play devil's advocate there, I think that to be the best dental practice in town is good enough in the beginning if you're still small, but as you grow to like 8, 9, 10 people, you can always revamp these visions and reinvigorate the practice with new visions and things like that. I do think that some vision is better than no vision. Even if it's something that feels a little bit like a placeholder, I still think that something is better than nothing. So we've got your vision, mission, values set up. Now we're going to move to expectations. And this is where everybody kind of stumbles because your core values aren't just, decorations. They're what drive expectations. And every expectation must have a certain number of components. There's an acronym for the components. They're called SMART metrics. I don't recall exactly who came up with the acronym of SMART, but SMART comes to, it's got to be specific. So as an example, you answer the phone within 3 rings, not answer phones promptly. It has to be measurable. So things like you got to track metrics like answer rates and response times because you want to be able to actually look at that number and be able to say it's something good. It's going to be achievable. So it's going to be something that can challenge your team without actually just breaking them. Like there's no reason to give them an unrealistic expectation. It has to be relevant, which ties directly to your vision and values. And it has to be time bound. So there's got to be clear deadlines with review periods that are a part of it. An example of this being ran in real business is Richard Branson started Virgin Atlantic with just 1 airplane. He tracked the same key metrics with bigger airplanes, but he just did it with smaller numbers. So like your practice metrics might track 5 hygiene chairs instead of 500 planes, but the principle of data-driven decisions still remains the same. So we've talked about, again, the vision, mission, values, and expectations. The way you give expectations is important. The way you communicate them is important. Because if you don't do a good job of communicating them as well as then continuing the communication of those expectations, then the team doesn't really learn anything, right? If you say to the team, hey, I want everything answered within 3 phone calls, but the phone's ringing off the hook all day long and no one's answering it, and you don't ever say anything about it, what have you actually done? You haven't really done much. In terms of that expectations, you've got to track it. Like this is where tracking comes into play, where it comes into monitoring these items, because the old saying, what gets monitored gets managed. That's the reason that we're doing things. We're connecting all these dots. You've got to monitor these things. And how do you monitor it whenever you're doing clinical stuff all day? And it's tough. As you get larger, you'll have more tools and access to capital that can help you pay for these things. You may have team members that their job is to help track some of these things for you. And you'll learn over time what are the important metrics to look at for each position. In terms of different things, you can have like a daily metrics dashboard for each role if you want to. It's very common that people have whiteboards in their break rooms to do this, keep up with the daily metrics. That's absolutely fine. You could have weekly performance summaries, which is where someone takes all that data and puts it into a report. And this takes time. This isn't something that's going to just be instantaneous for you. You're going to have to devote and invest some personal time probably to get this thing set up. And hopefully over time, you're going to be able to create some systems that can help automate this in a little bit better. You can go as far as saying that you can look at monthly trends as well, but that may be a little bit overkill. There's also automated systems for some of these things. Like if you use a dental intel or practice by numbers, you can sometimes set these things up to look at these things too. A lot of the stuff happens on the inside of the practice, not inside of the practice management software. And it's not something that sometimes can be tracked by a software. So sometimes there is a manual process to do it. One of the things that I like to do or like to tell people to do, and I know it seems like very low tech from a guy who's like super high tech, at least I like to think that I am, is to use legal pads to keep up with things and just keep columns of whatever it is you're trying to track and have someone put the numbers down over time. And if they didn't track the thing, then they haven't met an expectation. You said that we had only 10 phone calls this last month, but I know that we had more than that because I heard the phone ring way more than that. Why are you not tracking it? Right? We agreed that we were going to have a measurable expectation of this. And if you can't measure it, then I can't tell if we're doing it right or not. And if we aren't doing that, then I can't tell if we're meeting our mission. If we are doing that, then I can't tell if we're doing our vision, et cetera. So it all kind of flows together in how you use those things. I want you to think of monitoring like your practice management software, and it shows you what's happening, hopefully as close to real time as possible. In terms of other things you can do, having metrics discussed in morning huddles is great. Tracking production, schedule efficiency, collection rates, all those things are things that can be put into terms of monitoring tools for measuring these types of things. Other things you can do is one-on-one performance reviews. I do believe that one-on-ones are a really important thing to have conversations with your team so that you can talk about things like what obstacles are they facing and celebrate successes with them. And that's something that having a regular one-on-one with your team can really be valuable, because I find that a lot of times it's hard to celebrate people's successes whenever you don't have something on the schedule. And it doesn't have to be a ton of time. My team personally, we spend somewhere around 15 to 30 minutes a week for every one-on-one that we do. Everyone that has a direct below them or direct above them has a one-on-one with that person. So for me, I think I have like 7 one-on-ones. We have a few team meetings that I'm ahead of, obviously. And so a big portion of my week is actually talking to people in my team about these things and talking about these metrics. And then they have teams that they're doing the same thing with as well. And it kind of permeates throughout the firm. Now, obviously being a 30-person firm is very different than being a 3-person dental practice. But to exchange on that, I would say maybe spread out instead of being weekly, maybe having it be every 2 weeks, or maybe having it being every month or something like that. But definitely have something that you're doing that you're talking about to that person with one-on-one on a very regular basis. So you can do things such as tracking your goals, making sure that if you're talking to them, like saying, I noticed that you didn't do this thing right this last few weeks. Let's work on some training. Let's put this on your list of things to train for, as well as like you kind of align your values with someone. So even like Jeff Bezos, who runs one of the largest companies in the world, Amazon, obviously, he still does regular reviews of customer complaints. So if a leader at that scale can stay connected to ground level metrics, you as a practice owner can do it too. So we talked about expectations. Now let's move over to accountability. And accountability is not something that is well understood. Accountability is something that, for people that have the type of personality that I have, has been a hard thing to learn how to do well. It's not about catching someone doing something wrong. It's about setting them up for success. Because if they aren't doing something to the level of standards that you want it to be, if you don't have clear expectations tied to your values, then this is your opportunity to tell them that. If you truly want these people to succeed, then it is your job to point to them and say, hey, this is where we had a breakdown. This didn't happen. This wasn't to the level I want it to be. This is the expectation that I have. So again, clear expectations should be tied back to your core values. You should be doing regular performance feedback for these team members, because that's how you help people grow and get better. And you also need to be documenting these things. It's really great whenever you document these coaching conversations, because it can lead to things like performance improvement plans, which generally are for people that are having problems getting their stuff done. And if they're having problems getting stuff done, you may be saying goodbye to that team member. So it's helpful to have that stuff documented. So examples of things that can be happening, like if their metrics are declining for a long period of time, like say 3 to 4 months, let's say they're repeatedly missing certain targets, they violate different values, they have issues with communications. All those things can be things that you can talk about in these one-on-ones. Again, just to reiterate, the reason it's so important to do these one-on-ones is because if you don't, when are you going to talk to these people about this stuff? The only time you're ever going to talk to them is when something's gone wrong, right? You're going to pull them aside and be like, hey, you messed this up and we need to not be messing this up. Like, it's really negative over time. So if you have these pre-scheduled one-on-ones already in place, then you can, talk about not just the things they've done wrong. You can also do things like talk to them about how their life's going, build a relationship with them, a professional relationship with them, so that they know that they're more than just someone that's in the office just doing things for you all the time. So again, things you can talk about in these discussions, you can review their daily metrics and their weekly performance discussions. You can look at trends, all these other things you want to do. It just depends on the person and what their position is and things like that. I do also recommend having an annual review of your vision and mission with your team, and having like an annual meeting to go over everything if anything changes. Think of it like a periodontal maintenance. Regular checkups prevent major problems, but if you wait too long, and suddenly you're dealing with much bigger issues. And again, the key is connecting all of it. You've got to connect your vision to your values, your expectations, to help drive metrics, inform your accountability. And it's just a continuous cycle of improvement, not a one-time setup. And so to me, that's what leadership is. You're the person that holds all of those things together. You set the pace, you set the ideas, you set the concepts, and you go in and you put all these things together. You're the one who sets people up for those successes. And you also, as you grow and scale, you've got to set people up to hold other people to those expectations also, which is also really critical of a healthy organization. And obviously, there's other things that go into this. This is not just everything. As a part of this, you should have written documentation of how to do things. You should have training. You should have all the different pieces that go into leadership. But to me, that's the foundation. It's the building blocks of leadership. It's having a clear understanding of those 5 components. And remember, to recap what those 5 components were, it's your vision, it's your mission, it's your core values, it is setting proper expectations, and it's having accountability. And wrapped into all those, you have to be able to communicate that to your team, as well as have a consistent mode of communication, typically done through what are called one-on-ones with different team members. And as you grow and scale, eventually you won't have to have those one-on-ones as a business owner. You'll have maybe an office manager or other people that are a part of that conversation doing those things. And to me, that is what leadership really is. So we talked about leadership in general. Let's move over to bonus structures when we're talking about managing our team. There's a lot of different types of bonus structures that are out there, and some of them work great for some practices, some of them work great for other practices, and some just don't work at all, it seems like, under certain circumstances. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about the different types of bonuses that I see. The first one that I see is, hey, everybody just gets X amount of dollars or X percentage of their wages, and they get that bonus just willy-nilly whenever it comes up to be time. That is a way of doing it for sure. I don't really know why people don't just put those bonuses into people's wages if that's the case. I guess maybe it's because they don't want the team to have to get that wage and then get a bonus as well, because the bonuses are a part of it. I don't know. But it is something that if you're going to go that route, what I tell people to do is to use the first part of our conversation, those expectations and accountability, as like a scale of what you can unlock if you've got some set standard of bonuses. If they usually get 3% of their wages as a bonus on an annual basis, then make that a scale with your accountability to say, hey, if you hit this accountability level, you're going to get 100% of this bonus every year. If you only hit 50%, then you only get 50% of the bonus. And that's a way to hold people accountable as well from a monetary standpoint. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it that I've seen that's really common in the dental space is using some kind of minimum production thresholds based off of profitability and things like that. Those get really complicated really quickly, and I don't ever really know if they're actually that good. I've actually seen them cause some harm in some practices, especially practices that are growing or trying to grow really quickly, because what happens is they have these expectations set up, and these calculations are typically done based off of your team members' profitability, your staffing costs as a percentage of revenue. And so what happens is the practice grows, and you need to grow from a human capital side of things. Remember what I talked about with capacity being people side, the employee side. You need to grow in that standard in order to be able to take care of all the patients. And the team doesn't want to do that because if they know if they add another person, it's going to affect their bonuses. So that can kind of tie your shoelaces together a little bit when it comes down to a bonus if you're going that route. So be careful of that one. It can be an okay way of doing it, I think, if you're kind of a stagnated, flat practice and you're wanting to invigorate the office with some new things to do. The only thing I'll say is that, and I won't get super far into this in the numbers. I know the numbers make everybody fall asleep. If you do invigorate the practice like that, is that you have some type of a clawback in case people try and weight that calculation into one period. So as an example, if you're saying, hey, if we can get above an average of $10,000 a day in a month in production, sometimes what people do is they'll front load the first of the month, they'll front load the end of the month before and the month after, you won't be as busy, like purposely, because they've compacted the schedule so that they can hit those things. I tell people, if you're going to do it, have some type of a clawback mechanism to where either it mathematically smooths it out to where it's like maybe it's a quarter-based thing, or if it's not hit after a certain amount of time, after hitting the bonus, you can claw it back and it can go against the future bonuses in some way. Again, it gets complicated. It's not an easy calculation to do. It's really messy. You know, when you start adding in like, oh, well, there's bonuses that we paid in this quarter, or there's like, we offer these benefits in this way, it just gets really convoluted really quickly. And I'm not confident if that is a fantastic way of doing it in the first place. I do think that if you say, hey, it's going to be a production-based goal and we can all celebrate that as a team, awesome, great, fantastic. but I wouldn't weigh it like 1-to-1, like, oh, we're up by 10% over our goal, so everybody gets X% of this goal, which is a really common thing to see in this industry. And I've just seen it cause some harm in addition to the practices that have had success with it. So dealer's choice. If it's your business, you can do it however you want to. The other category I see of bonuses, and this is the one that I prefer and I like to try and tell people to do, because A, it's easier to track, and B, it's easier to conceptualize in terms of like a standard. And that is to incentivize certain things. As an example, fluoride. If your practice doesn't do a whole lot of fluoride, let's say that you want to hit 100 fluorides in a month. Well, you can tell the team, like, hey, if we hit 100 fluorides in a month, then everybody's going to get $25 or $25 gift card, or we'll host a lunch, or we'll do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever. You've got a very specific, measurable thing you're trying to hit, and it's something that the team can all talk about. You then say, hey, let's have a meeting to discuss how we're going to do this. Let's talk about the strategy behind it. Let's talk about the benefits of it. Let's get excited about it and do things like that. Say that's going to be like your quarterly goal for the beginning of 2025. You get together, you got to start doing it, you start working on it. And all of a sudden, hey, I'm finding that people say yes more when we do it like this, or whenever I present it like this, or when I do it like that, or whatever it may be. Awesome. Your team's starting to figure out how to do these things, right? And then at the end of the quarter, we'll say you hit 100. Awesome. Everybody gets the bonus. Everybody's happy. Well, do it again the next quarter and say, hey, let's move to 120, right? So let's challenge ourselves. Team's excited. They're invigorated. They've been able to do it because it was obtainable the first time. Second quarter, they do it again. Everything's great. Then the third quarter, maybe you don't want to do that anymore. Maybe you want to say, hey, now we're going to do ortho starts instead of fluoride. You do that for a couple of quarters. Everything's good again. People are getting bonuses. People are happy. You're happy because your practice is improving and everything starts getting better. The cool part about that is that in that third and fourth quarter, when fluoride is no longer the incentive, usually the team is self-trained on how to do that in the future. It's almost like you're building an arsenal of skills inside of your practice to be able to do this. And it's a really cool way of doing it. I think it's the best way of incentivizing bonuses because, again, you do that for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and all of a sudden your team's going to be like killers when it comes to all like the little things that make a practice really hum from a profitability standpoint. And there's no rule saying that you can't have this be practice-wide. And again, this is easier, admittedly, for smaller offices than it is for larger offices because of a small team can pull around something better. But if you get to be a larger office, then you can have departmental goals. Say, hey, that fluoride thing is just for the, assistants. Or maybe the hygiene teams is for perio, or maybe the associates or for crowns, or whatever it may be. You can choose and pick what solutions you want to find in your practice and have them almost self-train themselves to do these things because they're incentivized to do it. There's a saying in business, show me the incentives and I'll show you the direction of the business. So that's the reason I really like that as a bonus structure. And there's not some formula, there's not some magic math thing that goes along with that. And again, I'm a person who loves the math side of things and wishes that was the case. But I think that's the better way of doing it and better way of building a practice overall. And there's literally hundreds, if not thousands of things that you can incentivize in this. It can even be non-clinical things like Google reviews. It can be things like new patients. It can be things like patient feedback. It can be things like open chair time. It can be cancellations. It can be people that smiled on their way out of the office. It can be anything that you want. And that's the beauty of it. Super flexible. You get to pick your own path on it. It's like a choose your own adventure book back whenever you're in grade school, if you remember those things. Honestly, my favorite books when I was growing up, because I thought they were so fun to go back and forth and find the answers and find the different ways that the stories would connect. If you haven't heard of those stories, then you're going to be real confused by that comparative. They were great books when I was a kid, for a nerdy kid in Arkansas, at least. So yeah, those are the bonuses. And again, the key to bonuses to me is to align them with the accountability and the expectations as well. And you go from there. So now onto the team version of this, of the different positions and things like that. In terms of this, I break it down on a team base of there's the assistants, which are clinical help, which are going to be people that are helping the doctors do their dentistry. Maybe they're assisting the hygienists as well. And you're trying to, have them be a core part of making sure that your practice hums. There's an old saying that I've heard a lot of consultants say, and that is that you should never hire an associate when you could just add an assistant. What that typically means is that you've got to open operatories and that you could be adding an assistant to help you be working out of that operatory rather than adding an associate to be the person that does that instead. So assistants, they're important. I find that it's a measure of chair time. It's a measure of operatory usage, as well as like your personal ability to get production done as a dentist, or the ability for your associates to do dentistry based off of the quality of that assistant as well. In terms of compensation and things like that, in terms of managing them, again, this is a funny one because very commonly the assistants are one of the lower paid people in the team, but most of my docs that I know that are super high producing said they're one of the most valuable people on the team. While the standard for your area may only be $15, $20 an hour, a really, really valuable one's worth way more than that. So in terms of that, that brings me to a really important point about everything that comes into people, the human capital element of running a business. I do not believe in industry standards when it comes to people's pay. I believe that a really high quality team member is way more valuable than the averages. And I believe that if you can't find that person, then you shouldn't be worried about the averages. It shouldn't even be something you really should be consider a whole lot of. Now we have to use them as like a starting point, a building block to talk about. But if I have an assistant that's a killer assistant and the average to pay is $15 an hour in my area, but they're going to be leaving for, let's say $3 an hour more somewhere else, I'm willing to pay that person way more than $18 an hour if they're a killer, just because they make my life easy. They help me produce. If you think about that, so we'll call it 1,800 hours in a year, $10 an hour difference on 1,800 hours. That's $18,000 you're talking about. Let me ask you this, Doc. Is an assistant that makes your life easy worth $18,000 a year more than what an average assistant? Typically, yeah. So then the question becomes, no, that person is not that person. Well, then the question becomes, well, why is that person on your team? And that's the point where you shouldn't worry about, well, they're going to leave for $3 more an hour somewhere else. If you wouldn't hire them at that rate and you're not happy to pay them that amount, then why are you? So that'd be a person that you need to really consider. If I had this position open at this time and I was paying that much per hour, would this be the person I would hire at that rate? If no, then let them go. If yes, then keep them on. And again, this is not just for assistants. I should have gave you some background to all of the types of team members that are out there, but that's just my personal way of thinking about it, is on all of these team members. So talked about the assistants. In terms of the other team members, hygienists, obviously, they're going to be based off of how many patients they're seeing. Very typically a question about how much perio are we doing from a hygiene side of things? How good do they interact with the rest of the team? How well do they set the doctor up for production and for case acceptances for the treatment plans that they do? Those different things come into play a lot of the times when you're trying to measure the level of skill of a hygienist, right? And also just the quality of their work, obviously. The quality medical job that they're doing is also a pretty important piece of the puzzle too. In terms of front office, there's kind of two categories there. There's just general front office, and then there's office managers. Typically, front office people turn into office managers. In my mind, an office manager is a person that you delegate some of the stuff we talked about today into, and to help them do these different types of things. The front office person more is there for clerical work, for getting paperwork done, for entering information into the practice management software, making sure it's accurate, making sure the reports are good, making sure that patients are taken care of from a customer service perspective as well. And so there's some different intangible components of that is not just, hey, I want someone who can type 200 words a minute. No, you also want someone who can answer the phone and, welcome someone into the practice in a cheerful, charismatic way. Those are also important pieces of it too, typically in a lot of the offices that I speak with. They have to be good typically with numbers. They've got to be able to process paperwork, get insurances in, call insurances, et cetera, all those things that go along with running a front office. Those actually, to me, I think are probably the ones that are a bit more simple to probably tell the accountability of, like, hey, is it getting done or not? But I also don't run a dental practice. So this is from my clients' mouths to my ears. And again, same philosophy as on the hygiene, as on the assistants, as everybody in this, is that if they're not awesome, then don't be super worried about how much you're paying compared to the averages. If they are awesome, you should be willing to pay them pretty much wherever you can to keep them on. Finally, associates is one that is a complicated one, to say the least. A lot of my docs have been associates in the past, and it's complicated to manage an associate. When I'm speaking of this, I'm speaking of this purely from a numbers-based business perspective, not from a clinical medical perspective in any way for any of these team members, especially not the associates. But generally speaking, whenever you're bringing an associate on, you're going to be looking at a measurement of their productivity from a per patient standpoint, as well as from a per treatment plan standpoint as well. You want to see how much they're able to produce in terms of a treatment plan on average. How many of those do they pitch? How many are accepted? And what's the quantity of those? That generally translates into production per day. You got to just a little bit deeper than just production per day as a standard to be able to calculate that, to understand what may be happening there, what may not be happening. And again, in terms of paying them, people do it in very different ways. It's typically better for the owner to pay them a flat rate. Most associates that are really good and can produce are going to want to be on a production-based pay. The unicorn associate is that one that is willing to take a couple $100,000 a year, but can produce $1 million a year, and they don't really care. They're happy with it. They just want to do dentistry whenever they can. And typically those associates are rare, but they are out there. And if you can provide that in terms of that person wanting to be paid more, again, just like with assistants, I'm not concerned with paying an associate too much as long as they are absolutely great at their position. They make my life easier, and they are a person that is high standards, meets my core values, is here for the mission. They're here for the vision, and they're meeting all expectations in terms of accountability and things like that too. Yeah. So I hope this has been helpful in terms of like just a general understanding of leadership, a general understanding of bonus structures, general understanding of like employee positions and like how to measure them, as well as like kind of my philosophy on paying people just in general. And this runs across many different places. I've kind of put on the hat of pretend dental practice owner for all of this. And I'm going to be the first to confess, I don't own a dental practice and I don't run a dental practice. So this has just been my pretend business manager hat. And it's based off of my conversations with our 400 clients at Tooth and Coin, as well as the thousands of conversations I've had with the different dentists over the last 10 to 15 years, as well as with the hundreds, if not thousands of conversations I've had with different consultants and people along the way that help our clients with these types of things. I hope this has been helpful. And if you have any questions or comments, or if I was off base on anything, feel free to drop it in the comments. And until next time, have a great day. Thanks for listening to the Tooth and Coin podcast. If you enjoyed the show, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review as well as a written review. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps other dental professionals find our podcast and benefit from the financial insights that we share. So thanks for your support, and we'll catch you in the next episode where we'll continue to explore the business side of dentistry. Thanks for listening to the Tooth and Coin podcast. If you enjoyed the show, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star review as well as a written review. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps other dental professionals find our podcast and benefit from the financial insights that we share. So thanks for your support, and we'll catch you in the next episode where we'll continue to explore the business side of dentistry.